Welcome back to another DSCC lab walkthrough. Today we'll be going over how to configure a backup and enable the Active Directory recycle bin. Okay, so our first task is to use Windows Backup to backup system state. Now we are going to be using Windows Server Backup on our domain controller. So let's log into our domain controller, and first of all we're going to install the Windows Server Backup role onto our server. So let's navigate over to Manage, Add Roles and Features. And let's look for our Windows Server Backup feature. Alright, go ahead and select the role. Once you've located it, click on Next and complete the installation. So now the next thing we want to do before we actually get into our backup is we want to set up a place for our backups to go to. So on this scenario, we're going to do that to our app server. And before we can do that, we want to add a new device, which will be a hard disk, to our app server specifically for our backups and later on our share. So let's add a new device. We're going to configure this for a 40 gig drive. Select OK. And now let's log into our app server so we can complete the setup of this new device that we've added. So this is my app server. I'm gonna locate my file and storage services and then navigate to disk. And here I see this new disk that is 40 gigs, but it is offline and not configured. So let's change that. Let's right click on that drive and select Bring Online. Next thing we want to do is initialize it. So let's right click on it again and initialize. And now we can actually begin the setup of our device by right click on it, clicking on it and selecting New Volume. Alright, click on Next on the Before You Begin page. We're going to leave all this as default. Now here we would change the volume size if we wanted to partition our disk. We don't, we want it to be a full 40 gigs, so let's click on Next and leave that as default. Here is where we would assign the drive letter. We want to leave this as E. So let's go ahead and click on Next. And now we are here where we can label our volume and disk. This disk is going to be labeled as backups. So let's change the name real quick from New Volume to Backups. Click on Next once you've set up your label. And then you can review your settings, and if you are satisfied, click Create. Okay, so now that our drive has completed being created, we can go ahead and navigate to our File Explorer. And we see there, we can see our drive, backups E. If I go to this PC, I see a C drive and an E drive. So now let's do the following configurations for our E drive. We want to create a folder inside of our E drive, and we are also going to name this folder Backups. Now the next thing we want to do is share it with authenticated users having full control on the folder. So let's right click on the folder that we just created named Backups, and we are going to navigate to the properties of this folder. Once in the properties, you're going to head over to the sharing tab up top, and you're going to select advanced sharing. Let's enable that little button at the top where it says share this folder. This is going to allow other people to reach this folder to perform tasks on it. We want to leave this name as it is. This will be included in the path to get to this folder. So let's click apply, and then let's change and modify the permissions. Now by default, everyone has read-only rights. We're going to change that, and we are going to add our authenticated users to this. And we want to give them change and read permissions. So let's make sure that my authenticated users is selected. Actually, we are going to give them full control. Now, obviously, if you were in a actual production environment, you'd want to restrict these permissions a little bit more. But this is fine for now. This is just a lab environment. So once you've made sure that the proper people have the permissions that you want them to have, click on OK. Click on apply and OK again. And then you can see the network path to get to your folder. And then we can go ahead and click close. So now that we've created this folder for our backups to be imported into, or our files to back up into, let's log back into our domain controller and finish configuring our server backup. Now, before we get there, let me verify real quick that we can actually get to the folder that we just created. So let's type in that network path that we saw after we finished creating the folder and sharing it, and you should be able to get to it from another location or another server. And I am. So now I can test that I actually have permissions to it to change it by adding a file, which I just did, and now I'm going to try to delete it as well. If you did not set up the permissions correctly, you more than likely would get an error here, or you might not even be able to get to the folder at all. So I would go back to my folder and check the permissions on that and make sure you shared it properly. But now that I verified that, I can go ahead and continue with the actual backup setup. So let's go ahead and open up our Windows Server Backup. I am in my domain controller, and I will be running this backup from the domain controller. Alright, so let's open up Server Manager and open up Windows Server Backup. We'll give this a second to load. Alright, so now my local backup has finished loading, and we can proceed with the configuration of the actual backup. So let's go ahead on the right hand side. In the right pane, I am going to select Backup Schedule at the very top. And then this wizard will pop up, and we can go ahead and begin our configuration. We'll click next on the Getting Started page, just some general information like always. And we want to do a custom backup for this. So let's select custom and click on the add items. Now here we'll add the actual items that we want to include in our backup. For this, we want to include our system state. Now this will all depend on your environment, obviously, and what the procedures are for wherever you're at and how important you consider your server that you're running a Windows Server backup on. So once I selected that, I'll click next, and I'll select the time that I want to run this backup. So I want this backup to run once a day, and I want it to be at a time when not a lot of people are going to be on the network, so it doesn't cause a lot of interruptions or anything like that. So I'm going to set this select time of day to 12 or midnight. Okay, so I've selected 12 a.m. I can go ahead and click on next once I selected my time. And we want this to back up to a shared network folder, which is the folder that we just created in the previous steps on our app server. So select backup to a shared network folder and then click on next. Click on OK once you read this. And then we are going to type the location of that folder that we just created. So this is going to be my 11mu apps /backups. That failed because I mistyped my backup name. So let's fix that. 11mu apps. Click on next. And now it's going to ask me for credentials to see that I actually have permissions to that folder because it's located on our network, right? So not locally. Now, once again, if you didn't configure your folder correctly, you'd run into issues when it comes to this part. You'd get some type of access denied error or something along those lines. So I would go back to my app server and verify that my folder is configured correctly and that the user that I'm trying to run this backup from or that I input the credentials for has the proper permissions to get into that folder and read and write to it. Alright, so we go ahead and confirm our settings on this page. I see my time, any options, and the backup destinations, and I also see what I'm including in the actual backup. So if you're satisfied with the settings that you have and you don't have to change anything else, go ahead and click finish and complete your backup schedule. Okay, now our final task is to enable the Active Directory recycle bin. So let's open up Active Directory Administrative Center. Now I am on my domain controller, and you can see that I can pretty much view my Active Directory information, right? Just like I would and just your regular Active Directory Administrative Center. Okay, so to my left hand side, I can see my domain. I can see some of the OUs that I have, right? My 11mu, built-in computers, domain controllers. And to the right hand side, I see some tasks that I can run. And I'm going to enable my recycle bin. Click on OK. And once I refresh this page right here, up at the top right hand side, I'll see that this new folder called deleted objects got added into this middle pane right here. Right here, deleted objects. See, this folder did not exist and does not exist until after you enable the recycle bin. I can see that it's empty right now. So let's see how this would work if I needed to restore something. Now I'm going to log into my users and computer snap-in or open it. And I'm going to simulate an accidental deletion of an account. So let's go ahead and head over to my users and systems, and I'm going to delete Corporal Johnson's account. Now, let's just say you have one of your Marines or somebody junior at a help desk, and they accidentally deleted somebody's account that wasn't supposed to be deleted. Now, this is a great tool for restoring that, right? Now, I've just refreshed my deleted objects folder, and Corporal Johnson's account has just populated in there. I can simply right click on it and restore. I also have a restore to option if I wanted to restore it to a different location. But I just simply want to restore it. So now I'll head back to my users and computers, and then Corporal Johnson's account has repopulated in its correct OU.